Fair Game is a group of like-minded football clubs that are trying to change the governance of football in the UK. What we've seen over the last few weeks and months is the debacle of the European Super League. We've seen the collapse of Bury, we've seen the collapse of Macclesfield, and football has clearly got to a stage where it's unsustainable and we need change. So what we've been doing is, and the Dons Trust gave me this mandate, to go out and try and find clubs that would actually join us to try and make a difference. It's been a brilliant journey. We've seen a lot of engagement now, and there are clubs up and down the country that are backing us. We've also got some of the best minds in football. So we're not about tokenistic solutions, we're not about tokenistic top lines. We want realistic, long-term solutions that will make football a better and more sustainable place for all clubs. So there will never be a Bury, there will never be a Macclesfield, and even what happened to us should never happen again. That's where we're at, and that's what we're really pushing for right now. So what we did was look at identifying some of the really big problems that were out there. Things such as the parachute payments, things such as how much footballers are getting paid, how much we've got in loads of instances where clubs are paying more than they earn in a season on players' wages. There are clubs in the Championship which are paying 223% of their revenue on players' wages. That is clearly not sustainable. So we need to look at how we change that. We need to encourage and incentivise clubs to go for a sustainable approach. And that means really strong regulation, and that's what we've looked at and that's what we've identified. And I think that can make football a far better place. And that's what we've been pushing for. So we as individuals don't necessarily, I didn't think I had the solutions, so I looked for who did. And we've now identified, and we're working really closely with 44 different academics and experts and people with lived experience in football who really know these solutions, who have studied it. For the first time, we're giving them the options to present realistic, long-term solutions. We want to be in a situation where we're drafting legislation that will be taken up by government, where we're drafting new rules that will be adopted by the EFL and the Premier League and the Football Association to make what we're saying actually happen and become reality. There's no point having reviews. We've seen reviews in the past that end up sitting on a shelf becoming dusty and useless. We want things that will give massive change, realistic change, and help clubs that want to be sustainable, that want to be embedded within their community, thrive and get rewarded and incentivised for doing so. Fair Game was a great concept in the sense that, you know, when I stood to go on the Dons Trust, we sat down and we looked at various different strategies, various different things we wanted to take. And, you know, Zav and Jane and the rest of the board said, no, you take on this brief, we'll call it ambassadorial brief. Grandiose name, it's not really that grandiose. And I was asked to go out and say, well, how can AFC Wimbledon make a difference in the wider footballing world? And I approached probably 20 to 30 different people, some academics, journalists, people who sat on boards. And without fail, every single one of them said, look at the governance of football in the UK, change that, and we can really make a big difference. So that's where it began. And I then spoke to the Football Supporters Association. We sat down and we had a really good conversation. So the one thing that's never happened in all of these reviews is clubs coming together to call for change. Never done that before. So that was my challenge, and that's where I went out and I spoke to some clubs, and we slowly got a few on board, and then a few more, and then a few more. And now we're at 15. I expect we're in really good conversations with another 5 or 6 who are all taking it to their boards, and I expect all of those to come on board in the next couple of days, week or so. And beyond that, there's another 20, 25 that we've been talking to as well. So, I mean, I'd be optimistic that we could be looking by the end of July at something like 30 odd clubs, all on board, all calling for change, and all calling for something dramatically different in the way football is governed and run. And for clubs like AFC Wimbledon, it will be a massive change. It will be a sea change from looking at those parachute payments being redistributed financially to clubs that want to run well, that will abide by things like having good equality standards, having financial sustainability as part of their whole role model, having community and fan engagement. If we can do all of that and then get rewarded because we're running clubs, we're running football well, that is such an incentive for clubs to follow the likes of what we've done here and make sure that we get rewarded, and not the clubs that are gambling their futures and the heritage of their entire club just on the potential of maybe getting into the Premier League. And you think of what happened to Sheffield Wednesday or Derby or Bolton or Portsmouth. There are loads of clubs that have gambled and failed, and that's just not the way football should be.
No.
Because if you get into a situation where people put at risk their traditions and their histories, then you have shells of clubs like Bury and Macclesfield, and even very locally to us, Whiteley, just seen their ground potentially sold from underneath them. Those things should never be allowed to happen, and that's what Fair Game's all about. That's what Fair Game is trying to do, and it's great that the Dons Trust and the supporters of Wimbledon gave people like me the opportunity to grasp that and try and make that difference, and it's absolutely flying now. We've got loads of politicians on board and backing us. We've met the Shadow Minister, we've had a conversation with Tracy Crouch, who's leading the fan-led review. We're meeting a couple of more MPs and politicians over the next few days, and they're all coming on board, they're all really buying into this concept. So I think we've really pushed for it. We really are in this unique opportunity, and I hope that if other people want to come on board with our journey and push for it, then they can get on board, they can look at it, they can go to fairgameuk.org and log in and see the opportunities that are there, and come on board and help and support us and deliver realistic change that will help football for the future. The big thing about this is this is not a breakaway, this is not something doing, but this really can be a breakthrough for football. This can be the big difference that football has. This can be the moment where football takes it and grasps it again and gives it back to the fans, and gives it back to the communities, and gives it back some integrity that was lost with the European Super League. That's the big difference, and I'm delighted that AFC Wimbledon were right at the start of it. I'm delighted that Dons Trust were right at the start of it. I believe that we can take that journey and make it something that's nationwide, and for Wimbledon fans, something to be really proud of. What's weird when you look at the governance of football at the moment, the EFL, and I've had lots of conversations with the EFL, and I just think it's amazing where 4 months ago I would never be in this situation. I'd never thought I'd be getting Rick Parry and Trevor Birch and John Nagel calling me up and asking for my advice. I mean, that's on a different level of what's happened before, and they realise football needs to change. They're looking at it and realising, looking at the Championship, looking at what happened to Bury, Macclesfield, and what's happened with Derby and Sheffield Wednesday and Bolton and Portsmouth and Charlton and all these other clubs, and they know it has to change. And what's been great is they've looked at Fair Game because we've gathered the expertise, we've gathered all the academics, we've gathered people who've looked and put them in the room, and we've said, now find the solutions. The big thing, I think, when we're looking at the barrier is it's not being brave enough, breaking away from traditions, breaking away from the kind of way football's always been run, and trying to think of something different, and looking and embracing a new way of running football. And change is always scary. Change will always be in a situation where people go, well, I've always felt quite comfortable in my little bubble, and we need to look at something different, and we need to look at something that's a new way of running it. We've got, say, clubs that are spending way beyond their revenues. That's not sustainable. You've got people gambling on all the history and traditions of wonderful clubs and wonderful institutions, and that's not sustainable. And we need to look at something different, and it's the ability to be brave, and it's the ability to come together and think that football as a whole institution, as a whole way of being, needs to look and think differently. That's the barriers. That's the big barrier. So it's the brave clubs. It's the clubs that are willing to put their head above the parapet and say, right, actually I can do this, and we can achieve something really momentous here, and we can grasp this opportunity, and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. we must do it, and we can do it.